Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay, and this is the fourth installment of my series of covering all the WrestleManias up in the countdown to WrestleMania 41. Now we're at WrestleMania 4, and where we left off was WrestleMania 3. The difference between WrestleMania 4 and WrestleMania 3, one of the main differences is the venue. WrestleMania 3 was this huge venue, 93,173 fans, supposedly. Like we said, that is disputed. Most people say it's around 78,000 people, and that's the real record. But even that is tremendous. But now, in 1988, Donald Trump has gotten into the game. Donald Trump made a deal, as the title says, he makes a deal with the WWE. He wants to pay them what's called a site fee. Basically, they do their show, fans come to see their show, and they go to the casinos in Atlantic City. Or they come to the casinos and they come to do the show. So basically, it's like a Las Vegas residency act. That's what he wants to do with WWE. Now, that sounds all well and good, but the problem is, and we'll start to see it when it comes to this show, is that some of the people going there are not very knowledgeable about professional wrestling. They don't watch the show from week to week. They're not invested into the characters. They're there to gamble. So as they're gambling, they come to the arena, much like when WCW did their shows at the MGM Grand with Disney. So it's the same thing here. Fans are really quiet. They're sitting on their hands for a lot of the big angles, a lot of the big storylines that you would think that WWE's been building up for months and months. They really do nothing when it comes to reactions. So the reactions are really low. But anyway, they signed a 2-year deal, and both WrestleManias, WrestleMania 4 and 5 that we'll be covering next, WrestleMania 5, are covered here. And this WrestleMania piggybacks directly off of last year's WrestleMania. The huge event, Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan, it did record numbers, and they want to do a rematch. So one of the ways Andre the Giant and Bobby Heenan negotiate for a rematch is they start showing the replay of WrestleMania 3. Remember when I said Joey Morella's hand did go down for the 3, so it kind of looked like Andre pinned Hogan, right? Before the body slam and the leg drop. So they decided to do this in February of 1988. They're launching the main event. Basically like Saturday night's main event, but Saturday night's main event would come on after Saturday Night. Saturday night's main event would come on in place of Saturday Night Live. But the main event will come on after Saturday Night Live season had already wrapped. And the big one they're going to do is the rematch, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Now, in the weeks leading up to that, we've been seeing a number of vignettes from Ted DiBiase, now going by the $1 Million Man. And this was a really ambitious gimmick on Vince's part because this kind of reflected Vince's real personality. He's making money hands over fist. After WrestleMania 3, he's really living on the high horse. I mean, he's doing his thing. He's becoming a millionaire. And he wants a character that will reflect that. A character will be just like him. And DiBiase is coming in from Mid-South. And he's a great heel. So he decides to hook DiBiase up with this gimmick. And he's flying DiBiase out to the finest hotels. He's getting the finest food, the finest limousine rides, first-class flights, things that other wrestlers aren't really getting, and it's causing a lot of jealousy with the other wrestlers because he has a plan to finally put the belt on DiBiase. We're going to see how this angle plays out. So the first Royal Rumble is the contract signing between Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan for the rematch. And like I was saying, the first Royal Rumble was in response to Jim Crockett Promotions' Bunkhouse Stampede in '87. Vince was offended that Jim Crockett Promotions crossed the Mason-Dixon line and came into his territory and promoted cards in his territory. So not only did he launch the first Survivor Series in '87, in '88 he's like, you know what? I'm gonna give away my own battle royal type show, and I'm gonna do it for free. But it's gonna be a reverse battle royal, a reverse style battle royal, kind of like it originally started in the San Francisco territory, and it was the brainchild of Pat Patterson. Pat Patterson had been pitching into Vince, and Vince really didn't like the concept until Dick Ebersol vouched for it. He said it was an ingenious concept. So um, they do the first Royal Rumble, I believe, in Hamilton, Ontario. Yeah, it was Hamilton, Ontario. And the the event centers around the contract signing between Hogan and Andre and this battle wheel. The battle wheel was, of course, won by Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and it's on free TV. It's on the USA Network. So they have the contract signing, and then they have the match. And the match is viewed by millions of people, like 38 million people watched this rematch between Hogan and Andre, the largest televised event for any wrestling event ever. You know what I mean? Like no other wrestling event surpassed it. Not even the Attitude Era, not even This Is Your Life or any of the highest rated segments or Undertaker versus Stone Cold in '99 on Raw. Nothing surpassed the viewership of Hulk Hogan versus Andre 2. And there's a lot of shenanigans in the match because prior to this, when DiBiase first came in, he asked Hulk Hogan if he could buy the WWF Championship off him. And of course, Hogan says no. He refuses DiBiase's offer, but Andre takes the offer. So if Andre wins, then he's going to sell the WWF Championship to Ted DiBiase. And Andre does win because there's shenanigans. There's two referees. One referee is Earl Hebner, another referee is Dave Hebner, and they switch the referees. Right? They do a switcheroo, the twin referee angle, we call it. And while one referee is knocked out, the other one comes in. Dave Hebner is knocked out, and Earl Hebner comes in, Baby Earl, and counts Hogan out. Now, originally, they were going to run the angle where DiBiase paid for this one referee to have a face transplant of the original referee. But eventually, they just dropped that. And they just say, well, you know, they're twins. One was working in Jim Crockett Promotions, Earl was working in Jim Crockett Promotions, and Dave was working in the WWF. So basically, Earl Hebner screws Hogan out of the championship 9 years before he actually screwed Bret Hart. So Earl Hebner has that reputation. Dave eventually just becomes a WWF agent, and Earl continues to be the chief referee of the WWF at that time. But David says Hacksaw Jim Duggan should have won the WWF title in the tournament, not Randy Savage. Hacksaw Jim Duggan won the Royal Rumble. Yeah, we talked about that, David. Exactly. Yeah. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, David's correct. Hacksaw Jim Duggan came in with a lot of momentum. And he came in from the Mid-South territory. He was the biggest babyface in Mid-South when he left. He came in with a ton of momentum. He was feuding with Andre the Giant at first, and they were going to make him a huge star. And that's why they had him win the Royal Rumble. But what happened, David, was that he was caught in the car with the Iron Sheik, and that derailed his push. But David is absolutely right. Hacksaw was penciled in. Initially, one of the people that penciled in to possibly win the tournament at WrestleMania IV. The other person penciled in was Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase, of course, Jack Tunney comes out after the main event. Andre sells DiBiase the championship, and DiBiase's the champion, right, quote unquote. But then Jack Tunney comes out, ending Hogan's 4-year reign. Jack Tunney comes out, and Jack Tunney says, "No, you can't sell. You can't just buy the WWF Championship. That's illegal. You have to win the WWF Championship." So he declares the title vacant and announces that the title will be held up at the next WrestleMania in a tournament. So the plan and the initial plan was after the hacksaw thing happened and he was penciled out, the initial plan was that they were going to go with DiBiase. DiBiase was going to win the championship at WrestleMania 4 and then go on to at WrestleMania 5 the following year to face uh, Hogan and have Hogan win it back, right? Well, no, that doesn't happen because to pick up from the Intercontinental storyline, we recall we talked about WrestleMania 3, the historic match. Ricky Steamboat wins against Randy Savage. Well, Ricky Steamboat then is Intercontinental Champion. Him and Savage have a couple of rematches, right? And then he has a kid. He has his son Richie, and he wants to spend more time with his kid. Vince McMahon is not having it. He said, "I just put the Intercontinental Championship on you. I'm strapping the rocket to your ass, Ricky. You're not going to take off time to spend with your kid." So he takes the belt off Ricky Steamboat and puts it on the Honky Tonk Man. But the Honky Tonk Man is supposed to be uh, he's supposed to be a transitional champion, and it's supposed to go back on Randy Savage. But then Honky gets it up his ass. He's not. He says, "I'm not dropping the belt to Randy Savage." Sorry, Randy Savage had just turned face. They did this angle where the Hart Foundation and the Honky Tonk Man attack Randy Savage and hit him with a guitar. And it was supposed to be Randy Savage on the next Saturday night's main event, winning the WWF Championship back. I mean, the Intercontinental Championship back from the Honky Tonk Man. Honky Tonk Man says, "I'm not doing the job." So since he's not doing the since Honky's not doing the job, they got to reward Savage in a different way. So they decide to go with Savage winning the tournament, and that's how WrestleMania 4 ends. Spoiler alert: Randy Savage wins the tournament, and Ricky Steamboat, he's there. He's in the tournament. He faces Greg Valentine, but he does basically nothing. Now he has his kid. He's coming out with his kid, and eventually that would lead him to go back to the NWA. George Scott is booking for the NWA. As we know, we talked about when George Scott was booking for the WWE, George Scott discovered Ricky Steamboat in AWA and brought him over to the Carolinas. And what was the promoter who gave both Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat their gimmicks? So now that George Scott is back booking for what is now WCW, Steamboat comes back, and then Steamboat in 1989, the following year, proceeds to have his series of classic matches with Ric Flair. So Steamboat's out of there. So, but because Honky Tonk Man refused to drop the belt to Savage, now DiBiase is out as the champion, as the world champion, and Savage is in. And of course, that causes issues with DiBiase, but that will lead to a storyline with DiBiase. So here you have this hot heel, DiBiase, that you just spend a ton of money on to bring in, and he doesn't even win the championship. You know what I mean? And they don't even count his title reign as official because Andre sold it to him. So this event takes place March 27th, 1988. Donald Trump doing business with WWE for the first time. You can see pictures with Trump and Hulk Hogan and Trump and Andre. And the event is built around this tournament. Most of these tournament matches are shitty. Honestly, guys, this event it doesn't really have good matches. You know what I mean? Most of the matches are no good. Some of the newer stars we're seeing at this pay-per-view are the Ultimate Warrior. They're bringing the Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior comes in late '87 from World Class. His career started in California, In the mid '80s, he was part of a team called Power Team USA with himself and Sting. He was trained by Rick Bassman, the same guy who trained John Cena, and he came in as a tag team with Sting initially in Southern California. Then they move on to Jerry Jarrett's territory, where they're called the Blade Runners. At that time, the Road Warriors were a huge tag team. Every promotion had their copy version of the Road Warriors. Uh, Jim Crockett Promotions had American Starship before they had the Road Warriors. Mid South, Mid South, and Memphis had the Blade Runners, right? And WWE had Demolition. That's how big the Road Warriors were. Everybody had their own version of them. And the version of them that existed in Memphis and Mid South were Jim Hellwig and Steve Borden, Sting and the Ultimate Warrior. Well, when they go to Mid South, Bill Watts doesn't like the Ultimate Warrior, doesn't like Jim Hellwig, so Jim Hellwig leaves and Sting stays. Jim Hellwig goes to World Class Championship Wrestling, where they rename him the Dingo Warrior, where he's managed by Gary Hart. And he's a heel, of course, managed by Gary Hart. He's built. They changed his build from parts unknown to Queens, New York, and he has this name, the Dingo Warrior. He turns face by feuding with Rick Rude, who's the champion over there in World Class. And they start off with a heel versus heel program after he leaves Gary Hart, and is then managed by Percy Pringle, aka Paul Bearer, in World Class. It won't be long before he turns face in World Class and then leaves the promotion. He was very close during his time in World Class with Kerry Von Erich, to the point where fans used to spread the rumor that Kerry Von Erich and the Ultimate Warrior were actual brothers, or that Kerry Von Erich in '92 took the place of the Ultimate Warrior when the Warrior came back, which we'll be talking about when we get 4 years later when we get to WrestleMania 8. But he makes his debut in '87. His initial feud is with fellow strongman Hercules Hernandez, who he wrestles at this pay-per-view. Another person making their debut on this show is Bam Bam Bigelow. Bam Bam Bigelow had come into the promotion in 1987 from also from World Class Championship Wrestling. He was known as Crusher Yurkov, a a Russian gimmick that Fritz von Erich gave him, and that didn't work out. So when he comes to WWF initially, there's a battle for Bam Bam again, like with Randy Savage. All the managers are vying for his services, and eventually he hooks up with Oliver Humperdinck. And in Survivor Series '87, he and Hulk Hogan become the sole survivors because WWE was really high on Bam Bam Bigelow at first because he was a big guy that could do tremendous moves, and plus he had a sway in the wrestling industry because he had Paul Heyman's cosign. He started in the late '80s, way back in Studio 54, wrestling matches for Paul Heyman. But he loses in this pay-per-view to the One Man Gang, another fellow World Class Championship alum. One Man Gang will be undergoing a cosmetic transformation uh, in the coming in the coming year, as he will be trading in his one man gang gimmick, which he had in Mid South, he had in World Class, he had a bunch of different territories. His name is George Gray, but he will be trading that in for the gimmick of Akeem, the African Dream. Also, Brutus the Barber Beefcake, like we said, last event, newly turned face. He's now a barber. He'll be challenging for the Honky Talk Man's Intercontinental Championship, and he will lose to the Honky Talk Man. I mean, he will win, but he won by disqualification. Sorry. And the Islanders, Haku and Tama, a team managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan, not the hockey team, but the wrestling team, uh, will be taking on the British Bulldogs with Coco Beware. And the Bulldogs have Matilda, their little dog that they sick on Bobby Heenan, and Bobby Heenan has this suit that covers him up from the dog bites because he hates Matilda. So that's pretty much it for WrestleMania 4. Overall, a lot of the tournament matches are very lackluster. It ends the Hogan and Andre rematch. There's a Hogan and Andre rematch on this show as well. It ends with a double disqualification, kicking out both Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. And the finals end with Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase, in which Hogan helps him. Hogan actually helps the Macho Man, because on that episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, when he was attacked by the Honky Talk Man and the Hart Foundation, Miss Elizabeth went to the back. She got Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan came out. He made the save, and then him and Macho Man Randy Savage did the iconic handshake. And they're now the Mega Powers, brother. The Madness and the Mania have gotten together, and they formed the Mega Powers. So the Madness and the Mania, and Hogan had to steal the spotlight. He had to grandstand and hot dog, and he had to steal the spotlight from Randy Savage. Randy Savage won the title on his own. He's now the new WWF champion. And Hogan's sitting there pointing like he did it. But that begins a year of build till to the next main event, WrestleMania 5. So basically, now DiBiase is out of the running. DiBiase is so pathetic now. He has to create his own title belt. Since he couldn't become the WWF champion and he couldn't buy the WWF championship, he creates the $1 million championship. A really good-looking belt, but he hardly ever defended it. You know what I mean? He defends it against Virgil years and years later, but he hardly ever defended it. But he now is an unsanctioned champion, similar to the way The Rock is doing now with the People's Championship since last year's Hall of Fame, running around with it, but it means nothing because, like CM Punk said, it's a fake title. You know what I mean? DiBiase was the first to do that. After he failed to capture the championship, he was going around with this belt. Like, what the hell, man? Strike Force took on Demolition. I mentioned Demolition. Now they are the WWE's version of the Road Warriors. Crusher Khrushchev from Jim Cock Promotions. He comes in and he is as part of Demolition, and Superstar Bill Eadie trades in his gimmick as part of Demolition. And they're a dominant tag team. They're the first tag team to win the WWF Championship for 3 times. But here they're heels. They branched by Mr. Fuji. Later on in the year at Survivor Series, later on they start to feud with Powers of Pain, Haku, Barbarian, and the Warlord, who come over from Jim Crockett Promotions. They were feuding with the Road Warriors and Jim Crockett, and they come over and now they're feuding with Axe and Smash. And Mr. Fuji does the old switcheroo, and Mr. Fuji then becomes the manager of the Powers of Pain, and Axe and Smash become baby faces. But I'm saying that's later down the line. As far as here, Fuji is managing Axe and Smash. And they had a cool ass theme song too. We're demolition. Their their theme song was one of the cooler theme songs in the history of WWE. And as far as matches, their greatest matches in SummerSlam 1990. And speaking of SummerSlam, SummerSlam starts this year as well. It 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 the inaugural SummerSlam is in August of 1988. Andre the Giant and Ted DiBiase become a tag team, and like I said, Hogan and Randy Savage are a tag team, and they challenge Mega Powers versus Mega Bucks. uh, Hogan and Andre. Andre and Savage. Uh, Andre and DiBiase taking on Hogan and Savage at the first SummerSlam. So WWE has basically got their big four pay-per-views already established: Survivor Series, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, and WrestleMania, all established right now as of 1988. But what about Jim Crockett? Jim Crockett has had a bad year. He purchased and acquired the rights to the UWF, Bill Watts' promotion, and Vince blocked him at every turn. But one thing he does do, like as like a last saving grace, a Hail Mary, is while WrestleMania 4 is going on, he counter programs. Just like Vince did, Vince had the first Royal Rumble um, on USA Network. Well, Crockett goes to TBS and says we can do that too. And counter programming WrestleMania 4, he has the first Clash of Champions, 1988, where Sting. Remember, I said Sting was the member of the Blade Runners that stood behind in Mid South. When Hellwig left and went to World Class, Sting stood behind, and Sting, he teams with Eddie Gilbert. He's managed by Missy Hyatt initially in Mid South slash UWF, but then he becomes babyface. And when Mid South slash UWF gets bought out by Jim Crockett, Sting is one of the guys that comes over with the buyout, along with the Steiner brothers, along with Dr. Death Steve Williams, a few guys, not many guys, because just like with the invasion between WCW and WWF in 2001, the UWF Jim Crockett invasion storyline is one of the most mismanaged storylines because Dusty doesn't put over any of the UWF guys. He makes them all look like jabronis, with the exception of Sting. They realize that they need another babyface. Dusty's getting old. Magnum TA, of course, didn't work out. They turned Nikita Koloff face, and then him and Dusty are the superpowers, but he doesn't. He's not that great of a worker, so they need somebody else. They know that the Ultimate Warrior is climbing up the ranks in the WWF. Hulk Hogan is there, and Sting is kind of like a mishmash between the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan because he's built from Venice Beach like Hogan, but he has the look of the Ultimate Warrior, who was his former tag team partner. So the Horsemen are out there celebrating one night on WCW Saturday night, and Sting has his match, and he gets into an altercation with the Horsemen. So that leads Flair to challenge Sting to a match at the first Clash of Champions. And this Clash of Champions is tremendous. It's a great show. WCW just launched a new YouTube channel. Like was a couple days ago. They just launched a new YouTube channel. Check it out. And this event, Clash of Champions 1 88, is featured is featured on this. This does more this event did more buys than WrestleMania 4. And it's a greater it's a better wrestling show. Some of the highlights are Barry Windham and Lex Luger taking on the Four Horsemen. Arn and Tully Blanchard for the for the tag team titles, and for the U.S. tag team titles, the Midnight Express versus the Fantastics is another classic from this show. But what people most remember is Sting being made in this match. 30 minutes, 30 minutes with judges. Sting went the distance. He didn't win, but he went the distance, and it made him into a superstar. They had judges. They had Jason Hervey from the Wonder Years and Eddie Haskell from Leave It to Beaver, because they were launching the new version of Leave It to Beaver, like in '88. I don't know. I always said that the '80s tried to copy the '50s, right? But but Sting had a real good showing, and it almost looked like Sting was going to win, and that's how good Ric Flair was. Ric Flair made Sting that night, and from that point on, Sting became the franchise and face of WCW, the counter programming. It wasn't WCW yet; it was still Jim Crockett Promotions, but in December of 1988, it would become WCW as Ted Turner would purchase it. Jim Crockett went bankrupt, and he had no choice but to sell his promotion, to somebody. And Ted Turner didn't want to see wrestling go away, so Ted Turner buys the company. But it becomes a new set of adventures for WCW because Ted Turner needs somebody to manage it, and the guy he gets to manage it is a former manager of the Pizza Hut named Jim Herd, and he completely fucks it up. But anyway, this was a head-to-head battle between Jim Crockett Promotions and the WWF, WrestleMania IV versus Clash of Champions 1. And as good as Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase was, Ric Flair versus Sting was better. Ric Flair versus Sting became the template for the WCW feuds going on. So now we're in 19. As the year closes, Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan are a tag team, and Randy Savage is the champion. Now, I always disliked Randy Savage's run as champion because it was similar to when CM Punk, the Summer of Punk, it was similar to when Punk had his first run, where he was only really featured if he was wrestling Cena or Cena was, wrestling with him. This was similar to Randy Savage. He was only really featured in main events that he was teaming with Hulk Hogan this whole year. If he wasn't teaming with Hogan, he wasn't featured, except when he won the King of the Ring from King Kong Bundy in 1988. And that would add to his character when he eventually turns heel, which we'll talk about when we move on to WrestleMania V. So that's the end of WrestleMania 4. David, thank you for contributing. We're moving on to the next Trump WWE event, WrestleMania 5. The mega powers, the same mega powers that were established in WrestleMania 4, now explode in WrestleMania 5. Peace, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell button. See you in my next video.